welcome to the Our Giant Leap podcast presented by the Space Generation Advisory Council. Our Giant Leap discusses diversity, equity, and inclusion issues within the global aerospace industry and try to have some fun along the way. My name is Judith Kemp, and I am your host for today's podcast. The goal of this podcast is to bring light to a person's career in aerospace and to answer a specific topic. We will be coming up with tangible outcomes and solutions for the audience as takeaways from this podcast. So today, we will be talking about how to enter the aerospace industry coming from an underrepresented background. This episode features an awesome interview with Khristian Jones. She is the co-founder of the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship. We'll first be focusing on Khristian's career and the fellowship she co-founded. And then we'll ask her for concrete steps and guidelines on how to enter the aerospace industry. Hello and welcome, Khristian. It is our privilege to have you as our first guest on this podcast. So, can you please begin by introducing yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm really excited, first and foremost, to be with you all today and get to talk about two awesome things that I'm really excited about, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, I guess three: aerospace and the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship. But as Judith said, my name is Khristian Jones. I'm a co-founder of the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship, which is a volunteer organization for the leaders. So I'm also on my 9-to-5 job, a material test engineer for Virgin Galactic, which is the first commercial space line. Which is really exciting and exciting things are going on in the commercial space industry and the aerospace industry as a whole. So I'm very happy to be here again and get to talk with you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Khristian. We're very happy to have you on this podcast. Before we jump into the podcast, can you please tell us a bit more about the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship that you co-founded?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, for those who don't even know what a fellowship is, it's really an extension of an internship. So a lot of times students get internships where they get essentially a short-term job. But a fellowship is a little more than that. When you join a fellowship, you are given not only just an internship, but sometimes scholarship, mentorship, as well as other branches of professional development. So the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship is no different in that regard. We have internships at some of the top aerospace companies in the United States, such as Blue Origin, SpaceX, ABL Space Systems, Boeing, Airbus, you name it, our host companies for our fellowship. So each fellow will get paired with an internship as well as executive mentorship. So our students, and I want to mention for Black and African American students as well, those students will be paired with an executive mentor that will give guidance on career, kind of long-term goals, as well as a match with a peer mentor that kind of gives an understanding of, I just went through what you're going through, and I want to guide you through that experience and making the most of it and learning. So with that, on addition to that, the students get a whole almost a week summit, which is professional development, keynote speakers, tours in Washington, D.C., some can say the legal air capital of the world, but get tours of different buildings and different offices and things like that, according with the aerospace industry. And then also get professional development in regard to how to build a resume, how to improve their resume, how to land their next internship or job if they're getting to that point. So that is really what the summit is about. And then last but certainly not least, there's a bunch of other benefits of the fellowship as well. There's a cash grant that is helping the students to be able to not really have to worry about the financial aspect of, doing an internship and worrying about working during the summer other than just focusing on their internship. So each student is given a cash grant to either help for, tuition for the next semester or books for the next semester or transportation to get back and forth or whatever they're would have been saving up for working on their summer job. So that's really all encompassing what the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship does. However, I do want to take a second to honor Patti Grace Smith, because that is the reason why we are here, while we're helping these group of students. Patti Grace Smith was the first director and African-American female director of the commercial space sector of the FAA. There would not be a commercial space without Patti Grace Smith, in my humble opinion. She was a visionary and really understood the future. In 2000, when Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson were saying, we envision space travel commercially. This is something that we want to do aside from the normal NASA missions. And it was a joke to most government officials. It was, oh, this is not possible. No way. And Patti Grace Smith took the ideas of visionaries in the commercial space industry and the policymakers of the FAA and brought those two groups together to create what is now the commercial space industry, 20 years later down the line. So Patti Grace Smith is not only a extreme pillar of the commercial space industry, but also just a true representation and a true role model for Black students and people in general, especially Black females like myself. I 1000% look up to her. I wish I had the honor to meet her before her passing. But yeah, I look to pass the torch and give that torch to those students that we have in the fellowship.
So we're going to speak more about the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship. That was a very good and complete introduction. But before we jump into the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship, I want to learn more about you, Khristian. So let's go a bit deeper into who you are, into your career and what you do. But I would like to begin actually from where you come from. So how did you first get interested in aerospace? Where does your passion for aerospace come from?
Absolutely. Originally I'm from Chicago, Illinois, so we're more aviation heavy in Chicago. But I've always had a fascination with space, and I'm not really sure exactly what caught my interest the first moment, but I do remember going to the Planetarium, which I have to say, the Chicago Planetarium is one of the best planetariums in the United States. I've been to a few, and for sure, the Chicago Planetarium is, if not the best, in the top 3 planetariums in the country. And getting to see the vastness of the universe. And at that time, in early 2000s, we were still debating if Pluto was a planet or if it was a moon, if what exactly Pluto was. But I have always had an interest in that, not necessarily just aerospace. I had no idea what aerospace was in itself, but I just knew I love space and I wanted to work in space in some way, shape, or form. And then when I realized, and when I was old enough to know, oh, wow, people actually go up there and they're called astronauts, I was determined at that moment. I was probably 6th grade, and I decided I want to be an astronaut. Like, this is what I want to do. And so with that, you're still growing at a humble age. And we had a career fair, kind of a career kind of thing where we were given different career paths where, okay, well, you can be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer or whatever and what have you. So my teacher at the time had said, Khristian, you're a whiz at math and science. Like, you need to be an engineer. So I said, okay, I'm going to be an engineer. Great. Thank you for the advice. And I said, okay, well, how do I bridge wanting to be an engineer and also wanting to be in space? And so I literally Googled when Google was just starting to pick up. And I said, what career do I do if I love space, I'm good at math and science, and want to be an engineer? And aerospace engineering came up. And so that's really how I got into aerospace. Really, I just started doing a bunch of research and planned all of my high school courses to be getting to the goal of being an aerospace engineer. So taking those complex physics classes, calculus classes, algebra classes, to get me to the point of being ready to become an aerospace engineer. So I thought, become an aerospace engineer when I entered college.
So now comes the next question. How did you actually enter college? How did you access the aerospace education once you had understood what you wanted to do and that this was your path? What was the next step? Did you also Google that?
I wish. Honestly, and I wish I had a more proper thing to say, but I was the first, I'm not first generation student, but first generation engineering student. And so my parents and I were really figuring it all out for the first time when I went to Wichita State, which is my alma mater in Wichita, Kansas. Go Shocks for any of the Shocker fans out there. But really, it was not only just research, but my parents, I was very blessed to have parents that were, even if they didn't know how to get there, they would figure it out. And so got me connected with other folks in the industry, whether it be aviation or space, and just asking them what's the best way to go, where are the best schools, and where do you get the best experience to be able to later on become a professional aerospace engineer. And so I came across Wichita State, believe it or not, at a college fair, and I was looking for Georgia Tech and MIT and all of these awesome engineering and aerospace schools. And little Wichita State said, "Hey, oh my gosh, you're amazing. You know, here's a pamphlet. Come check us out. You'll get this much money." And so through all of that, I ended up choosing Wichita State as my, I guess, later education institution, which got me to be more of a aviation geek more than a space geek at the time. I didn't realize, there was a difference in, the different aerospace programs, but Wichita State is very aviation heavy because it is the air capital of the world, being that a lot of manufacturers of aircraft are based and were founded in Wichita, Kansas. So that's really how I discovered it and kind of put my feet on the ground when I got to college.
So it was mostly about your parents helping you to network and learn more about the college opportunities and education opportunities, and then you go into a fair and finding the school that you would go in.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. You also were part of the Brook Owens Fellowship. When does that come in, and what did this fellowship bring you?
Yes. So to keep it short, I know we only have a small amount of time, but there was a lot of things that came before Brook Owens Fellowship as far as a confidence thing, but I'll make sure to cover that later on in the podcast. But the Brook Owens Fellowship came about. I just got off of an internship at Southwest Airlines in 2018, summer 2018, and I absolutely loved it. And I just figured, hey, that's what I'm going to do. I found what my niche, and this is it. And I had a dear academic advisor that I'm still very close friends with now, that said, "Hey, Khristian, I know you really love this, and you have so much more to offer, and there's so much more out there for you." And so, of course, reluctantly, I trust her with my life. So I said, okay, fine. And I started looking for opportunities, and we had one of our appointments that we usually had. And she said, "You have to apply to the Brook Owens Fellowship." And I looked it up, and she had sent me the link, and I was like, no way I'm going to get into this fellowship. These women and people are just extremely established and are doing amazing things in the aerospace industry. There's no way. And of course, she gave me the what I call the Mama Angela look, and she said, "Apply." And so I did. And so, to my surprise, got into the fellowship. And the Brook Owens Fellowship, for those who don't know, are for women and non-binary students, some of the top women and non-binary students in the aerospace industry. And you're paired with an internship. So I interned with the Mojave Air and Spaceport out in Mojave, California, which is what sparked my understanding of commercial space. I really didn't have an awareness. Like, I knew NASA and I knew the space missions and JPL and whatnot, but I had no idea like what SpaceX was or like what Blue Origin was. And everybody was talking about SpaceX, but it was kind of like, okay, cool, like kind of space, but all right, this is a new idea for me. But getting to see all of these commercial space companies in one hub was absolutely amazing. And to be in a space where you are with people that are like you and very different, but also similar in the way of being in a male dominated industry. You don't necessarily feel very included. A lot of times you feel like the odd woman out. However, in that space, it was a very supportive of each other and really rooting each other on, even though we're all extremely accomplished. We're all like, oh my gosh, I want to be like you when I grow up. And we're like, but wait, we're all amazing. So, but it really did help me with my confidence and understand that, I didn't have to minimize myself. I don't have to be, a carbon copy of what the world thinks is an aerospace engineer. I can be Christian and fit right in and not necessarily fit, let me not say fit in, but find a space for me and that would accept and appreciate the skill set that I have in the aerospace industry. So I give literally all credit to them as far as that opportunity and giving me the chance to get confidence.
So I think what you're saying here is very interesting, and I would like to link your time like with the fellowship with what you said before, you entering college. When you entered college, were you part or did you feel part of underrepresented minorities? How was it? Like, I guess that was a huge difference with what you would experience later on, but how did you face it when you were studying?
Absolutely. It was very apparent. And not to be on a soapbox, but my first encounter at Wichita State University with my academic advisor was not a good one. And I can say it was very much of I already felt like I wasn't ready and that students were, head and shoulders over me as far as experience and whatnot. I did sports my whole life. I was a very good student. I had over a 4.0 in graduating from high school. However, I did sports my whole life. And so I wasn't necessarily into coding or science competitions or anything like that. And so in that regard, I definitely felt like an oddball. But being a Black female, I was, if not the only Black student in my classes, maybe one other Black student, and they would be male. And as far as females, I was usually the only female in my classes. And so I think over time, I like I said, I learned to minimize myself, just get by, do what I have to do, put my head down, and do what I needed to do in my classes and really use extracurricular activities as an outlet to be able to express what I was feeling on the inside or the things that I enjoyed. But I think how I overcame it prior to the Brook Owens Fellowship was really, and I don't suggest anyone do this. I actually suggest the opposite. But I learned to almost assimilate into the culture of being, very straight and narrow, like put your head down and work kind of thing. With my other male counterparts. But it definitely became very mundane. And at the end of the day, it wasn't me. And so the Brook Owens Fellowship came at just the right time, truly just the right time for me to be able to see that there's not only room for Khristian, but also for more women in the aerospace industry. And they're out there. They're definitely out there. And I didn't feel that way until the Brook Owens Fellowship.
I believe there are still a lot of people who are feeling now the way you felt when you entered college. That means you can be the only girl in the room, the only Black student in the room. What would be your message today for yourself when you entered college and were in that situation, but also obviously for all of the people who are today in this situation? Not everyone has the Brook Owens Fellowship to make them understand that they are not alone, what would be your message today for them?
Absolutely. First and foremost, the Brook Owens Fellowship and the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship are open. So we're hoping that we are able to reach a multitude of different types of people. There's room for everyone in the aerospace industry. There's always a need. Just if you can think about what we do on a daily basis on Earth, we need that in space. So even though it may not seem as advanced right now, there's a need for those professionals. But as far as advice with, more inclusion, I do think it's getting a lot better as far as creating groups and creating more inclusive working environments in the classroom. I can say find your niche and find your group, because that really helps with pushing along and understanding that you're not alone. For example, SWE, Society of Women Engineers, was one of those organizations that I found really helped me, because I had an understanding of you really aren't alone in this, and NSBE as well, the National Society of Black Engineers. And so, again, that added to the feeling of inclusion of you're not alone. Maybe in class you're alone, but you're not alone in this effort, in this journey. So I think my biggest word of advice to that is really be on the lookout. And TikTok, social media is even more of a thing now than when I was in school and just entering school. But be aware and open to different social media platforms as well to connect with folks. So that would be my biggest piece of advice for that, and kind of feeling alone, but how to overcome that.
So first message is there is room for everyone in the aerospace industry. And second message is be on the lookout and check on social media. It can be TikTok, it can be Twitter, it can be any social media. For what do you look for? Do you look for other people to chat with, to discuss with? What do you exactly look for?
I went on Facebook one day and I looked group, and sure enough, they popped up, and I get to see thousands of other young women, and some of them are even older in their 60s, that are just like myself. And so I just encourage to really use those hashtags as well. Hashtags are very important. Hashtag engineer, hashtag female engineer, hashtag female in STEM, or hashtag Black student in STEM. Like those different things have really helped, I think, people get connected. And also LinkedIn too. I know some students are still figuring LinkedIn out, but being willing to reach out and truly look, there's a way to see industry based, and you can truly just see a list of people that list aerospace on their profile and start finding people to network with that way. And that's truly a huge, huge lifesaver in getting yourself out there, if that makes sense.
It totally does make sense. That's maybe something we are also going to discuss later. But what you are also saying behind going on social media, looking for those hashtags, looking for also those communities of people who have the same passion as you. I think what you're also saying behind that is get a network, get to know people, speak with them, go outside your comfort zone, go and speak with people you have even never met outside of social media, and present yourself and get used to do that, because you will feel way less alone, and people always are happy also to share the story and get to know you, and you can also storytell about yourself, that kind of stuff. I think that's a very good point you mentioned. So we're going to go back a bit more about you. You have now graduated.
Yes.
What did you do? What was your first step?
First step was, number one, getting a job during a global pandemic. That was proving to be quite difficult. However, I was fortunate enough to intern with the spaceship company, which was the manufacturer for what is now holistically Virgin Galactic. So I was able to intern with the spaceship company, and then I guess I knocked it out of the ballpark because I was asked to contract until I graduated. And so maybe within 1 week or so of me being a contractor for the spaceship company, I was given a full-time offer from Virgin Galactic. And so I was very fortunate in that regard to be able to have that opportunity. Like I said, trying to get a job in a global pandemic where there are hiring freezes at all these different aerospace companies. I was very fortunate. So that was my first steps, and that I've been doing it ever since.
And what exactly is your job at Virgin Galactic?
Yes. So my job is a material test engineer. I really wish I could go into exact details, but it is proprietary information. So the best way I can describe it is I get to break things for fun and get to decide, and really get an opportunity to see the strengths of different materials that we use on the spaceship. And so it's really fun to me to push limits. But sometimes I have to be the bearer of bad news and say, we thought it was going to be this strong, or you thought it was going to be this strong, but it's actually, 10% lower than you designed it. And so sometimes I have to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm just the messenger. The data speaks for itself. So in a nutshell, that's what I do on my day to day.
You break things for fun. It sounds good as a job.
Definitely.
So now that we're speaking, so this is your current job. When you were also studying, you also completed internships. And I read in one of your interviews that you said internships are like dating. You can see what you like, what you don't like, and if you really like something, it's okay to stick with it. But if you don't, you can say you did it. So what did your internships bring you?
Absolutely. I am married to that analogy because it's so true. It's truly my first internship. I was a researcher for the NASA Jumpstart program, which is a state-run NASA program. So you're able to do research at it's not necessarily a NASA location, but you're doing the work for NASA with different research projects. And so I really was just figuring things out. That's what really got me thrown into material testing with different types of materials and understanding what that was, and really connecting that for me with my schoolwork, which I had a course called Mechanics of Materials. And I was like, this is so cool. You can stretch things, you can push things, you can figure out how strong they are based off of these numbers. And it feels like going over your head in class, but when you see it in reality, it makes so much sense, at least to me. But getting to work at Southwest Airlines, I think that's where I learned about the idea of dating, and okay, I kind of like this, but definitely want to see what's out there. And I think, Southwest was my first relationship, if you put it that way. It was kind of like, okay, this is great. This is awesome. I don't really know because I've never had anything else like this before. So this is really cool. And it showed me, number one, that, school, I love school. Don't get me wrong. Academics is very, very important. It gives you the tools for your toolbox. However, in reality, a lot of times that's not going to happen. Theory is just that, theory. In reality, there are a lot more factors. There's a lot of things that go into it. And Southwest Airlines allowed me to understand that. And that's the growing moment for me with Southwest Airlines. However, there was even more out there for me with commercial space and the Brook Owens Fellowship, and seeing that. So the Brook Owens Fellowship and the Mojave Air and Spaceport internship, like I said, gave me my understanding of commercial space and say, oh my gosh, there is a way for me to be an astronaut and not have to be a NASA employee or a NASA astronaut. And so again, it's like you take little bits and pieces of each experience, right? Or each relationship and say, okay, this is what I think I want. So right now I am a combination of all three of my internships. And I also had an internship at Airbus Americas working on the A380 program with cabin interiors. And so it's a mesh of all of those internships and all of those experiences that I put to use on the day-to-day. As you know, Virgin Galactic has both an airplane, a spaceship, also cabin interiors, also doing material testing on the day-to-day basis. So it allowed me to almost make my dream guy in a job. And you know, again, I'm still very young and still learning. But I think those internships gave me a direction of where I wanted to go and the development I wanted to have.
Totally. I think you got a very interesting point in what you said. You said academic are giving you the tools for your toolbox. And during internships, you are actually on the ground and you understand how to use the tools that studying gave you. If you were to do your education and your studies again, would you do it differently?
Yes. And the reason I say that is because I would say, as far as my courses go, I did the best that I could for what I knew at the time. However, what I would change is how I viewed myself and how that internal feeling of, you know, not belonging and not being smart enough or not knowing enough because it made me think small of myself. And I think for especially those fundamental courses, it made me struggle because I felt like I wasn't smart enough. So I didn't want to come off dumb per se. And then I didn't, because I felt like if you ask questions, then the assumption is you don't know the answer. And, you know, you feel like you're the stupid one out of the group, right? But as I became a upperclassman, I realized we're all lost. Most of the time, if you ask a question, everybody's like, oh, thank God you asked, because I didn't understand. And so I really feel like if I were to do that earlier, I would have been a lot more successful in my college career, because I was afraid to ask questions. And now I giggle with my manager all the time, because now I'm like, it's relentless. I'm asking questions continuously to the point where sometimes he's like, okay, all right, got another one, but it gets deeper. My questions get deeper as I go. So that would be my biggest change, is just asking questions and being willing to be vulnerable enough to ask questions to my professors and my peers, because everybody is figuring it out. None of us are rocket scientists yet. So even our professors, sometimes we ask a question and they're stumped sometimes, you know, if it's an oddball question about industry, you know, because they've been in academia so long. So ask questions, please. For those listening.
I fully agree with that. And I think that's, of course, for aerospace engineering students, but obviously not only. That's for anyone listening, anyone studying, anyone working, asking questions. Don't be shy to ask questions. There's no dumb question. And as you said, usually there are 10 people behind who did not dare to ask that question, and they feel very relieved that you are the one actually going in front and asking. Thank you very much, Khristian. We are now going to have a short break and listen to Jacqueline telling us about some fun facts that happen in the aerospace industry. We'll be right back.
For our first fun fact of the day, we turn our eyes to the Hubble Space Telescope. Launched in 1990, Hubble is one of the most productive scientific instruments of all time, with tens of thousands of papers published using the telescope's data. But did you know that Hubble is actually even more productive than originally intended? The telescope actually discovers stars completely on accident, often. You see, as Hubble seeks out a part of the sky to observe, astronomers provide it with guide stars to follow. These stars appear as a single point of light in the sky. Hubble uses these guide stars to find and then lock onto observational targets, keeping the guide stars in its sights via instruments called interferometers. If the light of the star changes, Then Hubble adjusts itself to keep itself steady. But sometimes, however, the interferometers report issues locking onto stars that would appear totally normal from Earth. After some study, scientists figured out that these rejected guide stars weren't actually normal stars at all. They were actually multi-star systems, like binary or trinary systems. So, even when it isn't trying, Hubble is still a productive observatory.
And we are back with Khristian. So now we're going to make the transition from your side, to the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship. With the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship, you are aiming to help other people. How did it start? Where does that come from? Was it from your personal experience? How did you end up co-funding a fellowship?
So, really that passion for helping people get into the aerospace industry, especially underrepresented people get into the aerospace industry, came from not only experience, but, having an understanding of that there was a gap there. I honestly have lived and was able to live and breathe diversity, equity, and inclusion since I was little. Even before I knew what that was, my mom is a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional. So I would listen to her and do her trainings and things of inclusion and what that looks like and what equity is and what it looks like to someone and what diversity is and what that looks like to the individual. And so really for me, in doing that work all through college, I got really sick and tired of companies coming to me or people coming to me saying, oh my gosh, why are there not more people like you? And for me, it was kind of like, well, there are people like me. You just aren't looking in the right places. And so that really sparked for me that idea of being able to have a fellowship or have a program that really helps students get those matchmakers kind of thing, like, making that Cupid, boom, the matches for students that are talented, have so much to offer, and host companies that just don't know where to look to find those students. So when I was actually approached by Will Pomerantz, who is also a co-founder of the Brook Owens Fellowship, and he had just said, it was right after the murder of George Floyd, and the Brook Owens Fellowship was doing a reevaluation of what exactly they could do for the Black community. And so it was one thing that sparked on his heart to help and how can I do more? And so he came to me with this idea and saying, hey, you're really passionate about this. This is a great outlet. And I apologize for my language, you're badass, and at the end of the day, I want to do this with you. And so I thought about it for a few days. I did, I must say, and admit. But in the end, it was just a really tough time for the country. It was a really tough time for social justice. But I decided that at the end of the day, it's about the students. And if I can help the students get to where they need to get to and to reach their goals, that's what it's about. It doesn't matter if it's, taken by the host company as something that's this, what do we call it? Like kind of a catchphrase, there we go, of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a few years ago, everyone was, oh, we're so diverse. We want to be equitable. We want to be inclusive. And so I was afraid of that. I was afraid of just being a token organization to say, check the box. Okay, we have Black students in our program. However, I realized that regardless of the motive of the industry or regardless of the motive of that specific host company, they're getting amazing talent. And these students are more than deserving of opportunities to show what they have and show what they've got, because they've got a lot to offer, way beyond what I was when I was a freshman, sophomore student, for sure. So really that was just kind of what brought it all together, the passions of two people. And then we found two more people to help us carry the load. of figuring it all out from scratch. So that's really how it came about. And like I said, I'm extremely passionate about it. If I wasn't doing Patti Grace Smith Fellowship, I would be doing something else that helps students get into the aerospace industry, particularly younger students. I did engineering outreach when I was in college for elementary and middle school students, to teach them about different STEM fields and different STEM activities. We would break it down. One of my favorite activities that we did was the peanut butter assembly line. And we made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to teach students about industrial engineering and what it's like to be an industrial engineer and create assembly lines and things. So we would give students the materials, the bread, the jelly, the peanut butter, their forks or spoons or whatever they decided to use to spread, and said, okay, you have 30 minutes, make as many peanut butter and jelly sandwiches as you possibly can, and everybody has to have a role. So we would give them about 3 to 4 people in a group. And another thing that I really loved, not only just teaching them about an engineering discipline, but also after that, we would make sure our students were sanitary and wearing gloves and washing their hands and all of that. And we would donate those sandwiches to the food bank, the Kansas Food Bank. So they were able to do as well with learning. They're also able to help other people who are in need of food. And so that was my absolute favorite activity that we did through the program. And I absolutely love it. I wish I could still do it sometimes, but I got my hands full right now. But it's so important to reach back. It starts very small in elementary school. Students don't just pop up one day and say, I want to be a rocket scientist when they get to college. You have to be exposed to those things at an early age.
And what do you look for in the applicants of the PGS Fellowship?
Yeah, so really the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship, what we're looking for, I would say I hate to say I don't know, because there's not a I don't know. It's definitely a point. Really, it stems from Patti Grace Smith and who she was, and being a trailblazer, being someone who's wanting to reach out to make the world a better place, someone who can see outside of themselves, and holistically be able to say, okay, this is how I want my efforts to affect the bigger picture. And so really it's looking for those students who are looking to make a difference, and those leaders and trailblazers, because it's not going to be an easy journey. That's just what it is. It's not. There's going to be trials. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be things that make you want to quit. But we look for those that are wanting to persevere and have those stories and those backgrounds that if, they made it, regardless of what the situation was, they made it and they're here and they're doing amazing work. And so that's what we really look for in our students. Really just number one, people think outside themselves. How can my efforts, contribute to the bigger picture? Trailblazers. And 3, those with the backgrounds that are adding to what is already an amazing background in aerospace, but giving those diverse backgrounds to be able to say, I've experienced this, and this is what makes me who I am today, and getting to learn about those students and what they've overcome as well.
What was the biggest surprise for you or for your team when you created this fellowship?
I think the biggest surprise for me was the outpouring of support. It was so many folks that were just reaching out and saying, thank you for doing this. This was so needed. And so there was an outpour of that. I think it was definitely surprising for both myself and my team. And I think the biggest, other than that, I think it's when you start something new, you're still learning and figuring things out. So it was definitely a year of trial and error and trying to do better for the next year of the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship. But I just think overall it was the outpour of support of, backing us as an organization and wanting to be partners with us. So that was really surprising, but exciting. And I think it's very needed.
It is always needed, and it also means having that much support means you are actually targeting and finding solutions for a real problem that exists. So it's also quite, I would say, positive to have that much support when you're starting that type of. If right now I am a student and I'm looking for the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship or maybe another fellowship, but let's focus with this example, how should I apply? What should I give you as content? What are you looking into the applicants?
So year by year, it does change as we learn and grow as an organization. But usually we open our applications around August, September time. So students should definitely follow us on social media, as well as the best place to look is www.pgsfellowship.org. And that is where we announce our applications are open, and then also on our social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok as well. So we will announce that the applications are open. And as far as content goes, we do change it every year, but it's a series of essays that we ask the students to respond to a certain question and get to know them that way, as well as other what am I trying? I don't want to give anything away, but we do throw some surprises in there just because we know that students may not necessarily write as well, but interview very great, so giving different opportunities to showcase who they are and their passion for the industry. So that's really what you should be looking for is our website, August, September timeframe, to be looking for applications to open. One thing I didn't say and explicitly say earlier is the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship is not only for Black and African American students, but it's also freshman, sophomore community college students. So one of the requirements is that you may not have had a internship in the aerospace industry yet. So we have some students that come in and have had internships before, but just not in the aerospace industry, and that's totally fine. We actually like that. That means you come with some level of experience, but that's the only requirement is you can't have had an internship already in the aerospace industry, which makes our fellowship unique because a lot of the other fellowships, it's actually required that you do have internship experience in the aerospace industry prior to applying for the program.
How old are usually the people who are applying?
Well, we don't have an age as far as a number goes. We have students that are non-traditional, so went back to school and getting their bachelor's degree as, in their late 20s, early 30s. However, as far as just age requirement for studies, it's just freshman, sophomore, community college students. As long as you're classified as that in your transcripts, then you're more than welcome to be a part of the program. There's no age per se, age limit, but usually we haven't had it yet, but a lot of our students are even, younger and just high achievers from high school. So, 17, just turning 17, but in college early. So it's just as long as you're classified as community college or a freshman, sophomore student, you're good to go.
Can you give one last tip of advice for someone who is currently looking forward to apply for this fellowship from one of the co-founders, exclusive here on the OGL podcast?
Yes, I think biggest piece of advice is just apply. I really encourage students because it's easy to feel like have that imposter syndrome, like we talked a little bit earlier. It's really important to take that first step, because that first step is what keeps the momentum going. Object in motion stays in motion kind of thing. If you don't start, you won't. So definitely taking that leap of faith and just applying. There are a lot of different support systems via Facebook, and I want to say there's Slack as well for students that are applying for the different fellowships, just to share, what they're working on and tips and tricks, to help students be able to better prepare for the application. So definitely take that leap. Worst thing that could happen is a no, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you can't apply next year or to a different program or what have you. So definitely take that first step and apply. And we're here to help. So reach out. There's an Ask Me section of the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship website. And so you can just reach out and it'll email the co-founders if there are any questions that we can answer in regard to the application.
Wonderful. So 2 advices here: just apply, take that first step, and the worst thing that can happen is a no. So we're going to close the segment on the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship with this. So we first discovered a bit more about Khristian, who she is. She explained to us what the fellowship is, so the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship that she co-funded. We are now going to go into the last part of the Urgently podcast, which is the tangible outcome. We want to come up with advices, concrete outcomes for you, the audience, the take-home messages that we are going to give you. And I would like to speak about a topic that we already a bit discussed before. It's about networking. How important is a network in the aerospace industry?
It's some of the most important things. Networking is really important. One of the best pieces of advice that I have gotten ever was, it's not always what you know, not always who you know, but who knows you. And that's very important. And so networking is important because it's not always, I know someone who's in that company. Sometimes it's people who know your talent, can speak to your talent, that are sponsoring you for opportunities. There are times where I had no clue that someone was looking at me as a candidate for a position, didn't know the position existed, and someone from my network reached out and said, hey, there's this opportunity and they want you. And so networking is very, very important. I just always tell my students, especially, there's an etiquette. I know sometimes as young people, social media is very informal, and yes, it shouldn't be intimidating. However, especially on LinkedIn, it's important to, if you do cold call, as we like to call it, or cold ping, without knowing someone in the industry, definitely introduce yourself and, and understand that you are a stranger. However, wanting to network in a virtual space. So don't be afraid to ping someone on LinkedIn and just show interest if it's something that they're working on or something that they do, something about their career that they've done and you're interested in. For sure, be the first one to, send a request and just share who you are. Don't be a creep. That's all I say. And just share who you are, why you're reaching out. But that is the main thing. It's really, really important because the aerospace industry is so small, and really take every opportunity to network. Sometimes I'm in spaces where I'm at a conference and it's not necessarily somebody that I could know or need to know, but you never know when that person is going to come around or you're going to need them or they need you. And so it's very important to be open and not necessarily just think so linear of how can this person help me. It's more down the line as well. You never know who you're going to encounter and what opportunities are going to come your way. So that's a really big part of networking as well.
So I would like to break down a little bit what you just said. Networking is very important, and I totally agree on that. One of the advice you're giving is go on LinkedIn and do some cold call or some cold messages. For people who have never done that, a cold message is actually sending a message to someone you have not spoken before to. They do not know you, they probably have never heard about you, and you are reaching out. It can be very intimidating at first, but that's something you will get used to with the time. What is, from your side, what is a good cold message?
It's the professional version of sliding into someone's DMs. Like, that's literally what a cold message is on LinkedIn. But for me, best cold messages that I receive are just people that are very open and wanting to network in the way of introducing themselves, where they met me or where they've seen me, just so it's not like anything weird. There are creeps on LinkedIn, believe it or not, that just, send these mass messages. So be careful of that, of course. But usually it's just introducing themselves and just, I'm a person, and just sharing that are the best for me. And also ones that share, yes, I know the point of a cold message is to get the person's attention or connect with them, but also understanding that, number one, you're a stranger. Number two, probably very busy. And number three, just a respecting of time. And so I always appreciate when, folks are say, I really respect your time and I appreciate your time. If you do have the time, would you be willing to chat or be willing to meet up or what have you? And so that's really important to me. And it's not just, what you can do for me. A lot of times when students are reaching out, or just professionals in general, it's like what you can do for me as opposed to the exchange. So what I like to do in my cold messages or cold calls is, how can I be of assistance to you as well? I don't want it to be a one-way street. So that would be my tips is come off personable, introduce yourself, definitely have an understanding of time and appreciation for the person who's receiving its time, as well as, showing that there's a two-way street of, I don't want to just pick your brain. I'm also here as a resource if you need me in any capacity.
And I think that is very valuable for cold messages on LinkedIn, for example, but not only. That's valuable for any job application you might write or you might send, any internship application. Always think both ways. Always think, how can you also bring someone to the person you're writing to? Because it means you're also thinking about what you can bring. And as you said, how can this be both ways and not only one way? So that's about creating a network with cold messages on LinkedIn. When you go and attend a conference, for example, or just an event, what would be your advice? So let's take an example. You're a student, you just arrived to that event. How do you handle them? What are your tips on that?
That's a great question. I think it's easier for me because I'm an extrovert and I tend to be quite social. So for me, I just start talking to people, and it sounds crazy, but sometimes you can be, just sitting at, a food station or a dessert table or whatever and start conversations with folks. But if you are more introverted, I would just implore you to step out of your comfort zone in that way. And you don't have to go announce to the entire event, hi, I'm here and I want to network. It's okay to start with one person and, hi, my name is, I work for, or I attend. And a lot of time those events, especially at conferences, they're designed to network. So it's not like this offhand weird situation, being able to just make it a little more comfortable. So I just implore everyone for sure, just to start with one person. It can be awkward too, if you're at a conference per se, and you're at a networking event and you see someone who you heard from and are really excited to meet them. My biggest trick, and what I learned, it was very nerve-wracking at first, but just slide in the conversation. Like, don't interrupt, but it's easy to kind of inch your way and someone can see, I'm trying to have a conversation with that person, especially if it's a keynote speaker or something like that. I know when I've been on the receiving side of that, I notice, like, if someone's trying to come up to me and speak with me, I try to keep my conversation short so that, everyone can come talk to me if they want to. And I know it's very receptive for sure. Definitely don't be afraid, because it can be awkward when you're just standing there when someone's talking, but eventually they will, say, oh, hello, my name is, and kind of go from there. So I just encourage you to to push past the awkwardness to be able to have that conversation.
Totally. And I know this is something that can get very intimidating, especially when you are not used to it, or as you said, if you are an introvert. Don't forget that you have a human being in front of you. They've been there. They know what it is. For some people, it's easier. For some people, it's harder. But they have also been students. They have been young professionals. They got used to it, as everyone or the more experienced people did. But don't forget that you're not alone in the room, and it's okay to just go and speak to the people. And that's also what people are kind of expecting. And if this is also something that can help, is practice your little pitch at first. Exactly as you said, hi, my name is Khristian. I'm the co-founder of the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship, or whatever your little pitch is. If you're not comfortable with this, then just practice it before, and then you will see it will help you. And go and speak to that first person that will introduce you to someone else, and it will be fine. So that's about networking during events. I would like to jump on the last topic. When you co-founded the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship, did you experience some negative or passive-aggressive comments on what you are doing in favor of equality, diversity, inclusion in the aerospace sector? Is this something that happened? And also, how would you handle that, or what advice can you give on how to handle that type of comments?
Absolutely. They were few and far between, for sure. I think in my experience with just the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship, they were definitely more few and far between. But overall, as far as kind of backhanded comments or whatnot, a lot of times I would hear, well, we have to lower standards, to accommodate for this level of diversity. And that's not the case at all. If not, sometimes performing twice as hard and is twice as good as their counterparts. And so there have been negative comments or passive aggressive comments regarding the idea of reverse racism, and saying, well, if there's an organization for African American and Black students, why isn't there an organization specifically for white students, right? And that's something that scopes beyond the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship. But how I handle those questions is, if there wasn't a need for it, it wouldn't exist. If these groups were included in those in the bigger scope, the bigger group, then there would be no need for us. So clearly there is a problem. And it's not saying we don't want you to hear. It's saying we're trying to get to the point where we can be included in groups. And the same thing with the Brook Owens Fellowship, where it's, oh, well, why isn't there a fellowship for all males, right? And I'm like, look at 9 out of 10 fellowships that are already out there, right? It's majority male. So that's kind of how I combat that, is if it was already inclusion within the industry and there was already diversity within this industry, there would be no need. So overall, I try to ignore those comments as much as possible, because I definitely know those folks are sometimes uneducated about the issue at hand. But I take it as a lesson, as a lesson learned, and into a teachable moment for individuals to understand.
And do you feel that you sometimes manage to convince those people? Or what are the reaction from your answer?
Sometimes, you get combative, and I personally I don't have Twitter today because I don't like going back and forth with people on the internet. But a lot of times it's, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. And I appreciate that point of view. I'm learning, I didn't know it existed, or I didn't understand it, but I'm learning from our conversation and from this experience. So I think a lot of times it's receptive, especially in this day and age. There's so much information out there. And there's so many talks and topics about it, covering exactly what we're talking about. So it's receptive a lot of times after that conversation. But I refuse to get in an argument, with someone that just wants to argue. It's like, okay, I know I'm doing a good thing. So, and these students are benefiting, and the industry is benefiting.
Totally agree with you on that. Sometimes it's also not worth fighting if you feel that it's not going to help anyone. And we're going to close the podcast on that. Thank you very, very much, Khristian, for your time and for sharing your amazing experience and thoughts on the subject. I really appreciated our experience together and our discussion together. Maybe as a wrapping up question, can you share with us a funny story from your work or from your studies?
I think and I laugh about it now, it wasn't funny nearly at the time, but I remember in my fundamentals of flight class, it's basically the physics behind air, and it talks about, like, just like in the word, the fundamentals of flight, how do we make planes fly? And it seems like an easy concept, but it was not easy. And I distinctly remember crying during my final and literally having to wipe my tears from my pages. And the TA, because I have test anxiety, so I got not privileges, they're not privileges, but for disability, learning disabilities and such, and having more troubles with studies and things like that. So I was given help with that. And so I was able to take my test separately with extended time. And so my TA was watching me take the exam, and he just stopped and was like, "Are you okay?" Like, "Are you okay?" And I was just like, "Yes," and handed him my final. And I laugh at it now. It definitely, again, it wasn't funny at the time, but I think that was the best. When I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, when anyone says like they cried at an exam or anything like that, I've shed a lot of tears. So I'm happy to share stories with folks that are battling with that, because it's happened to me.
That was actually funny now, but I guess it was not funny when you were there. But also, I think it's great that you're raising awareness about test anxiety and speaking up about that type of topics. Thank you very, very much, Khristian, for being on this podcast. It was a real pleasure.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our time together, and I look forward to getting to talk again and hopefully be able to come back again and talk on some other topics with you. And again, I just appreciate and I'm so privileged to have time with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Khristian. I will be very happy to have you again on this podcast. So you can find the summary of this podcast in its description and on social media, where we will be publishing the key takeaways from our discussion with Khristian. You can also directly interact with us on the Diversity and Gender Equality Project Group's social media and the feedback or advice from your side. Also, let us know who you would like us to interview next. For more information and resources, please visit the Diversity and Gender Equality Project Group website as part of the Space Generation Advisory Council. Thanks again to our amazing guest, and feel free to check out the Patti Grace Smith Fellowship at www.pgsfellowship.org. Thank you all for listening, and see you next time.